Hello, everyone. I hope you're doing well today. In this video, we are looking at an article that got published pretty recently regarding the renaming of Turbulent, one of these studios under CIG, and they are being renamed to CIG Montreal. Now, we're going to get into some of the specifics of this article in just a little bit here, as there are some pretty wild claims about release windows for Star Citizen 1.0, but we're going to get into that in just 1 second. But before we start, if you are enjoying the content, feel free to stick around and subscribe. I do have channel memberships open if you wanted to go the extra mile, and feel free to join the community Discord. I will have a link for that down below, and I would absolutely love to have you there. Outside of that, let's get into one of the most random but interesting articles we've gotten in a while. Now, to start this off, this is I think, a French article, so it was translated over to English afterwards. But just heads up, there are a couple things here that might sound a little bit weird, but I think that's mainly just because of the translation. Now, the article starts off really strong by saying CIG Montreal will work on refining the online game Star Citizen, which has been available in a pre official version since 2017, but whose official launch version, Star Citizen 1.0, is now promised for 2027 or 2028. Now, obviously, we're going to stop here and discuss this because it's a wild way to open up an article, but I do want to give my opinion first just to get it out of the way. I think this is entirely possible in terms of the date range that we are given here. Now, obviously, there's a lot that goes into that, some of which is actually in this article, but we will get into that in just a second. When it comes to the actual article itself, I'm pretty positive that this information comes from Chris Roberts. I think this was confirmed online. Unfortunately, I just do not have a screenshot, but I'm almost positive someone that would give a date range is Chris Roberts. Now, I think there's two ways this could have gone, the unprepared way and the prepared way. I think the unprepared way is what we always see from Chris, where he is put on the spot and he feels the pressure to just give out some sort of date range because we know that when we hear date ranges, we kind of latch onto it and get really excited for that specific time frame. And then there's the prepared version where he actually knows he might get asked this question. And internally, ever since they kind of came up with this whole 1.0 outline and given Squadron 42 and when it's supposed to release, they actually came up with this date range between 2027 and 2028. Now, I think that is much more unlikely, unfortunately, in terms of that exactly being the case. But I do have a tiny bit more faith that there is some more legitimacy to this time frame than some people are saying there is. I think the next sentence in the article actually kind of helps us out a little bit here, and that is CIG Montreal is indeed looking to increase its workforce to some 150 employees. Now, there could be a mix up in translation here, so I'm not going to completely be dead set on one or the other, but I'm not sure if this is saying they want another 150 employees. I think that is a pretty large amount, so I'm not sure about that. Or they're just simply trying to increase what they currently have to 150. And unfortunately, I don't know what they have currently, so it's really hard to tell exactly what that number could be, but regardless, what they're saying here is they want to expand their studio, which I think is going to be a good thing. Now, the rest of this article isn't saying too much in terms of like Star Citizen Squadron stuff. Really, the biggest thing here is that they want features from Squadron to come to Star Citizen. We obviously know that. And then they don't want Squadron to be overshadowed by GTA 6, but they also want to have as big of an event as GTA. Not entirely sure if that's possible, but I am looking forward to seeing what the marketing is and whatnot for Squadron. So I guess we'll see, but not super convinced on that one there. Now, this is the time where I want to get a little bit back into the opinion side of this and how I think that this 2027 2028 release window is somewhat possible for Star Citizen 1.0. Now, before you write the comments that I'm coping and whatnot, let me try and explain what I'm saying here. First thing is that Squadron is leaving development next year, which is a huge thing. Squadron has been just annihilating the resources for Star Citizen for so long, and to finally have that game out in the wild and get those development resources back on Star Citizen, I think we're going to be in for a huge amount of stuff happening in a short amount of time. Now, that being said, the transition from Squadron to Star Citizen might not be the smoothest, but I do think that we're actually seeing that a little bit here with this announcement of CIG Montreal. Now, of course, I am not an executive or an employee at CIG. I do not know what is going on behind the scenes. But what I can tell you is that once we kind of slowly shift our heads back towards Star Citizen within all the studios and whatnot, and it's finally back in kind of full development, I think we're really going to see a huge amount of changes. One of the things that reaffirms that for me personally is the fact that once Squadron is out the door, they need to retain those players within Star Citizen as much as humanly possible. And in order to do that, they really need a good game for Star Citizen. And not to hate on Star Citizen, but it's not really a good game yet. It's a good kind of feature demo thing, but it's not a good game yet. And it's not something that a lot of players are going to stick around and check out for very long. In order to ensure that people do stay around for Star Citizen, they're going to want to support the ever living shit out of that game, probably before Squadron even releases. Now, the way I see this happening is that from now until like halfway point of 2026, we're slowly going to see those big features that we've seen in all the monthly reports and whatnot make their way into the verse before Squadron actually releases so that we can not only get them out, test them and whatnot, iron out the bugs, but make sure that it feels like a cohesive experience whenever Squadron releases. So that even if we only have the first version of base building, crafting, and all these big features, we at least have a form of it, and that allows the players that come from Squadron to experience Star Citizen in a somewhat more enjoyable light than, of course, what we've been experiencing for the past however many years at this point. So if they do all of that and they really push into Squadron's release, how about after Squadron's release? How are they going to get to that 2027, 2028 release window? Well, I think one of the big things that's going to help them and that they've been developing for quite some time now are a lot of tools to make development quicker. So, as we know from last year's Genesis, one of the big examples there is things like Stark Attack and a lot of the environmental tools that they're going to use, which instead of making artists handcraft these environments from the ground up and make sure everything is kind of picture perfect, they're able to use tools at a much larger scale so that creating planets, environments, and different mission locations is much, much quicker than it was in the past. And then there's systems like Maelstrom, which is basically a brand new damage model, which can be applied to different aspects of the game rather than building it from the ground up for each individual item. Of course, it's not as simple as that, but as far as I'm concerned, and from what we've heard from the developers, it's just these things that make their lives a lot easier and generally make development go by a little bit quicker. And without yapping on too much about all these different things, if we really look at it from like a big perspective, CIG, if they go by these, time frames, has about 3 years and 3 months before that time frame is no longer valid. Now, that is a significant amount of time, and looking at it from face value, I still think it is possible for CIG to do it. I think we're going to be able to determine if it's possible a lot sooner though. So, within the next 6 months or so, if we don't really see some significant feature development and additions to the Star Citizen verse, I think it's safe to say that what their initial time frame that we're getting here is probably incorrect. Again, I'm really only making this video because I care about these two games and I want to see them succeed. Obviously, this article that we just saw a couple days ago is not going to be like the main announcement for these things. And honestly, with CitizenCon in about a month and a week or so, it's probably a good time for them to actually address some of these big things like Squadron's release and maybe even 1.0 stuff. But regardless, this is only kind of the beginning of slowly seeing Star Citizen get back into the spotlight. I don't necessarily think it's something that we're going to see very soon, but I am really hoping that within the next year or so, we really see some significant development on the Star Citizen side of things. So I really do care about these games. I would love for them to succeed. It's just been real damn tough this year to go along with the project because it's definitely been a slow, slow burner. Now, with that all being said, thank you so much for watching and sticking around to the end. I know that this is a topic that's been kind of discussed a good bit over the past few days, but I would love to hear your thoughts on this down below. Is this something that you agree with? Do you think that there is a possibility we see 1.0 towards that 2028, 2027 release window? Or do you think I'm kind of crazy for thinking that this is even remotely possible? Regardless of what it is, I would still love to hear your thoughts down below. We are slowly getting towards that CitizenCon Direct Day, so hopefully that'll be a really nice big information drop for us. I know it's been a slow year, fellas, so hopefully that is the day that we finally get a good boost in morale and hype for this game and project. But regardless, again, thank you so much for watching. I appreciate you so very much. I hope you have a wonderful day, and I will see you in the next video.